Hello viewers. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Mr. Juma, who is from the Department of Political Science, Islamic University, Uganda. Mr. Juma is here to talk about trade and sustainable development in a globalized world. Welcome, Mr. Juma. Right. Can you tell us what is globalization, trade, and sustainable?
Hello viewers. First of all, as Zakyya said, Kakuba Sultan Juma is my name. I'm a lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Department of Political Science. I've been working at the Islamic University for the last 10 years or so. And I want to say that Islamic University in Uganda is an international university in character and Islamic in culture. It is international in the sense that it admits students all over the world, mainly English speaking. And of recent, even students from French-speaking countries, they have started, coming in and having remedial programs before they join the normal programs. And it is in the Islamic in culture in the sense that it adheres to Islamic principles. But this does not suggest that this is a university for only Muslims. It is for everyone, irrespective of somebody's religion. But what is unique about Islamic University is that we have got 3 campuses besides the main campus. And one of the campuses is only for females. I think this makes it a unique university on the African continent. I think, to my simple knowledge, I've never heard of any university with female campus only in the whole of Africa. But at least in the world there could be other campuses. And
So when you talk of trade and sustainable development, what do you mean by that?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to try to make our viewers to understand 3 key concepts. That is globalization, trade, and sustainable development. Globalization, many proponents and supporters of this concept have tried to come up with different definitions of these concepts. But in my personal view, I've always looked at it as a process whereby the world is increasingly, or there is intensification of interaction in the social relations. What I mean here is that nowadays the world is now a global village. It has been integrated into a small village to the extent that the happenings, local happenings in a particular area are influenced by happenings from which are happening 1,000 miles away. And this one makes it really a small village. For example, when you look at Africa, there are so many events which take place as a result of those events which are happening far away. For example, in America, when you look at things like, culture, many Africans, I don't know here in Mauritius, but at least I've observed, people are trying to copy, the Western style of culture as a result of globalization, because the a world has been, integrated, that it is a small village. Because nowadays you can, when we talk about, a world being integrated, it is related to communication technology, innovation in communication technology, because in a few minutes you can know what is happening in America, what is happening in USA, and that is what we actually mean by globalization. And when somebody is talking about globalization, there are certain things which come into mind when I talk about great increased interaction in social relations. Somebody will talk about access to markets. Somebody will be talking about increased access to financial aid, new technology. These are the issues which somebody will be looking at.
Right.
On the other hand, trade simply means the buying and selling of commodities, simple as that.
Right.
When we talk about international trade, this is now the buying and selling of goods and services across borders. And the other concept which I want to make it clear to our viewers is the concept of sustainable development. You see, in the immediate post-independence, or in Africa and other developing countries, when they attained independence, most of the leaders were talking about economic growth. Wherever a country could attain independence, they would talk of economic growth to transform their political economies. But since then, up to today, many countries which attained their independence from the colonialists have not attained economic growth. And what has happened is that politicians have now added the concept of sustainable development. When you find any political leader, when he's either addressing, gathering, or is campaigning, he will not miss out to say, I'm going to try my best, to have sustainable development. So what is sustainable development? In my simple understanding of this concept, this is a kind of creating a kind of situation whereby the present generation is empowered, to have skills of having or producing the basics of life without compromising the future generation. What I mean here is that this situation which is created should be kept and maintained so that even the future generation will be in a position, to benefit. It should not be a loss to the future generation. Right. That's why you find that most leaders nowadays, even donor agencies nowadays, they talk about sustainable development. We are going to give you a donation, but we want you to create sustainable development because economic growth has not been attained.
And what has been Uganda's commitment to international trade?
Uganda, like any other country, has identified trade as one of the designated sites which can improve on the living standards of its population. And because of this, Uganda has been committed to various trade agreements. I will actually, for the purposes or in the interest of time, try to explain a few of them. But of course, it is a signatory to many trade agreements. One, you may be aware, now African leaders have come to realize that Africa cannot develop depending on international donation or support alone. So they have come up with what we call New Economic Partnership for African Development.
And what is that?
That is it is a framework which they have envisaged to be a vision and a strategic. It is a vision and strategic framework which African leaders are advocating for, so that instead of seeking direct support from developed countries, they instead work in a partnership. Say Africa, most African countries are endowed with natural resources. They are now saying, instead of say getting these natural raw materials and exporting them, they are now inviting developed world to provide the technology and invest within Africa so that they can transform their economies.
So
There are so many objectives which are embedded in NEPAD. And one of them is good governance. You know, theories of economic growth and development which were developed in the Western world, it has now come to our knowledge that they are inapplicable actually to developing world. Now there are certain things which leaders and development planners have come up, which they think, if they are well articulated, can lead to the transformation of African countries and other developing countries. And this is good governance.
But then, do you think Uganda has benefited, the industrial sector of Uganda has benefited from globalization?
Well, Uganda has, to some extent, benefited.
Yes.
And to a great extent, it has, lost, or it has not gained from the globalization process. Before I gave my views on this, I was still telling you the Uganda's commitment to international trade. And one of them is that Uganda is a signatory to the New Economic Partnership for African Development. Secondly, it is a signatory to World Trade Organization, a body which is concerned with monitoring the regulation of trade in the whole world. And then it is also a signatory to the African, Caribbean, and Pacific State and the European Union. This was, an understanding which was initiated by European Union to open up their markets for African countries so that they can directly, export or sell to the European markets. Now, on the question whether Uganda has actually benefited or lost, I want to say that there are so many challenges which the Ugandan industrial sector has faced and is still facing. One, some imports which are supposed to be inputs in the process of production of textiles are very expensive. Uganda has got the raw material, that's cotton, which is used for manufacturing textile. But there are certain other inputs which are supposed to be complementary to the raw material, so that these commodities are very expensive, and it's a very big challenge. And when the input is very expensive, it means even the output will be very expensive. And you cannot sell your commodity at a higher price when you are many producers of the same commodities. You may agree or disagree with me. In Africa, most of us are raw material producer, and many countries are producing cotton. And more so, they are engaged in the textile industrial sector. So if your commodity is very expensive, you cannot sell many. You will have few customers going for your commodity because it is very expensive. Then the other challenge, which is actually hindering the industrial sector of Uganda to benefit from globalization, is a failure to maintain international standards. You know, globalization has encouraged, or it has brought in free access to markets. Sell anywhere where you want through the liberalization, but now there are standards which are set, particularly these developed countries, which are saying now sell to our markets. Our countries, developing countries like Uganda, and I believe even Mauritius, you know, cannot maintain the international standards because of the poor technology we have. So it's a very big challenge. And the other challenge is cheap commodities on the international markets. You know, I don't know in Mauritius here, but in Uganda, there is what we call mivumba. Mivumba is the second-hand clothes, which are, imported from developed countries. They are very cheap. And this one is a threat to textile industries in Uganda. And how do you really think Uganda can benefit when there is this cheap commodity and there is this globalized situation where there is free flow of goods and services? You know, so this one still stands a big problem, and I really don't know whether the sector is most likely to, to stand this competition. The other challenge is a poor power supply. You know, in our country, the power generating project which was established, those in the colonial times, it was planned for a few people. But now the population has increased. The demand for power is so high. This has resulted into inadequate power supply. It cannot supply the industries effectively, and more so, it hinders, the production process. Then we also have a problem of inadequate skilled manpower. With the globalization, now the world has been put into a village. There has been, improvement in technology. Everything now, as we talk now, is computerized. Everything, if you want to do design, do everything, you have to go computer literate. But when you look at the human resource we have,
It's very poor.
it's very poor, and we are not ready for this skill. So it is a very big challenge to the industrial sector. And closely related to that, globalization is a very big challenge to this sector.
And what is, sorry, but then what do you think is the future of Uganda's textile industrial sector?
Well, the future of Uganda's textile, in my view, is not bright. The reason why I'm saying so, one is that the products, the textile products, as I've said earlier, they are very expensive. And since they are very expensive, you know very well, majority of our population in developing countries, particularly in my country, Uganda, they are very poor people. They cannot go for expensive commodities. Right. And this is made worse when, the production itself cannot serve the local market. There are so many interplaying forces here. There is a change in consumer demands for goods. There is, inadequate low demand for local commodities because of poor quality, as I've talked about it earlier. So the government is looking on exporting these commodities. But in the ideal situation, if you want to have sustainable trade, which can lead to sustainable development, first create the local market so that there is demand for the commodities. But this one is a big problem because as I speak, even the dressing, I don't think whether I have a cloth made in Uganda on my, even you, I don't think what we are putting on is made in Mauritius. You will have to tell me. But this is a big challenge.
Okay.
And we have these industries we boast that we can produce. How do you produce for export when you cannot serve the local? So this one makes me to look at the future being actually, not bright. Then the other aspect is the technology. The technology is so sophisticated. Day after day, technology is changing. But when you look at our education system, mostly I don't know here in Mauritius, but in Uganda, you find that the majority go in for art subjects, and very few will go for science-based subjects. So where do we really get the skilled labor to work or to match with the emerging sophisticated technology? And you see developing countries like Uganda and others, they are at a disadvantage in this globalized world because as they are trying to pick up from a certain stage, a new thing comes on and they are forced, to abandon this one and go for another. So this one makes me to actually doubt the future, not only in Uganda, but even in other countries which seem to have similar characteristics, including Mauritius.
Well, Mr. Juma, we have reached the end of our program, but before we end, any final words?
Well, thank you, Madam Zakyya. I would like to thank the management of Mauritius College of the Air for inviting me on this program, and I'm actually very happy, and I hope our viewers outside there will actually borrow a leaf and try to make a comparison, because when you look at Uganda and other African countries and any other developing countries seem to have similar characteristics, and possibly maybe Asian countries who have actually decided to stand on their feet. They are bound to gain from globalization process. But Africa, I want to say that we stand to lose. I know many people will say globalization is very good because it brings in so many things, but when you look at the costs of globalization, they actually outweigh the benefits in Africa in various sectors. I actually looked at only the industrial sector, but it cuts across various sectors. I wish to thank you for hosting me, and I wish you well, and I wish to invite you to Uganda so that you can have that experience.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, viewers, and until next time, bye-bye.